Welcome back everyone to Most Amazing Top 10. Today we're going to be talking about parallel universes. If you're a bit of a skeptic, and I understand that, you may lump this in with the supernatural. Parallel universes aren't real, and if people think they've been to one, there's probably a very rational explanation, right? Sound familiar? Well, here's the thing though, if we're being technical, there is nothing really that says parallel universes can't exist. In fact, a leading scientific theory right now promotes the concept of the multiverse, where infinite versions of reality exist side by side in other dimensions. On top of that, these stories are also really creepy. Absolute bonus there. My name is Danny Burke, and this is the top 10 scary parallel universe stories. Starting off at number 10 now, we have The Man from TAURED. This is one of my favourite stories ever, actually. I remember hearing about it as a kid, and now here I am telling it. Nice. In July 1954, a bearded man got stopped during customs at Tokyo Airport. He looked nervous and caught the attention of a customs officer. When interviewed, his native tongue was French, but he spoke fluent Japanese. When they asked where he was from, he replied, TAURED. They had never heard of that place before, and they asked him to tell them more. He was confused that they had never heard of his country, but he obliged. He said that TAURED was in between France and Spain, and had been a country for 1,000 years. The customs officer called him out and said that he was lying. No such place existed. The man from TAURED became irate and pulled out his passport. Sure enough, the passport was from TAURED, and it looked valid. They asked him to then point to TAURED on a map. Now he said he couldn't see TAURED on this map, but it should be right there, and he pointed at a real place called Andorra. At this point, everyone was confused, including the man. The authorities chose to investigate things further the next day. They got him a hotel room and placed a guard outside for the night. The next morning though, they opened the door to find that he had vanished. There was no trace of him. He couldn't have escaped out the window as there were many floors up. To make matters even stranger, the man's documents such as his checkbook, passport and driver's license had also disappeared from the airport security room. What a great story to start us off there. What do you guys think about that? Any decent theories? Let me know. Moving on to number 9 now, we have The Missing Boyfriend. This is a story I found online about a woman called Lenia Barcia from Madrid. One morning she woke up in her apartment and things just seemed off. It was the same place she knew, but items were out of place and didn't belong there. Before she had time to figure that out though, there was a more pressing issue. Her boyfriend was gone. She looked for his phone number, but that was gone too. In a panic, she asked her friends, and to her horror, they didn't know who she was talking about. She called the police to file a missing persons report, but they told her there were no records of that person at all. A psychiatrist told her that she was hallucinating due to stress, but Lenia disagreed. When she talked to her family about the whole thing, they didn't seem to remember the same things as she did, like her sister's recent shoulder operation. They said it never even happened. At work, she was in the same company, but a different department altogether. She told her supervisor, who she'd never met before, that she felt ill and needed to go home. Eventually, Lenia was declared mentally ill. She had no history of substance abuse or mental illness at all. By all accounts, her experience was a complete mystery. Lenia maintains that she believes she slipped from her own universe to a very slightly different one. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Carol Chase McElheney. In March 2006, Carol Chase McElheney was driving from San Bernardino to California to take her dog to some sheepdog trials. On the way, she visited Riverside, a small town where her family had lived for years when she was a kid, and her grandparents were also buried there in the local cemetery. As soon as she made the decision to go there though, she smelt cigar smoke in the car. It was just like the only memory she had of her grandfather, who died when she was a young child. Very strange. After the sheepdog trials, she headed back to Riverside, but something wasn't right. The cemetery where her grandparents were buried was just an overgrown patch of weeds. She couldn't find her childhood home or any of her family's homes, in fact. The houses were different, but their numbers were still correct. The main road in the town was different too, full of scary looking people and with different buildings. On the other hand, the local school and the college did look the same. Some things were identical. Carol left Riverside convinced that she had slipped into a parallel universe. A few years later, Carol's father died and was buried in the Riverside Cemetery. When she went there for the funeral, she found the town had returned to the one that she remembered as a child, and she never encountered the alternate dimension Riverside again. At the number 7 spot now, we have The Castle. This is a story that was shared to the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit by user John30859. He said, "Me, my cousin and my aunt were all outside on the front porch playing. We were all the same age, around 4 to 5. 2 teenagers approached us and asked if we wanted to see a castle. I knew this was bad news, but my cousin had to go see it, so we both agreed to follow. We went into the woods and walked along a trail for what felt like an eternity, probably 20 minutes or so realistically. We arrived to find a beautiful, gleaming, majestic castle in the distance. I'm talking something you would see in the movies. The place was made of heaven. It literally shined as if we entered a city of wealth. We excitedly looked at each other and sprinted home to tell our parents. The teenagers stayed behind. They never chased or followed. Our run back was instantaneous, as if it took a few seconds compared to the walk there. We go and tell my mom, and obviously she is freaked out and tells us no more playing outside for the day. Here's the thing though, my mom was so incredibly strict on me that she would have never let me go out of her sight for longer than a minute. The door to the front porch was open, so there's no way two random teenagers could have actually taken us into the woods, let alone anywhere without one of our parents seeing. My mom and my cousin's mom were the two adults home at the time. I've spoken to my mom about this multiple times. There's no church or anything nearby that we could have mistaken to be a castle. I've even looked as an adult. No luck. All three of us remember this phenomenon. I'm 25 now, so it's been 20 years, but we've spoken about this at the age of 6, 8, 12, 15, etc. Essentially every time we see each other. We all remember, always have. I know some will chalk this up as kids imagining things, but I swear to you that this was real. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the second chance. This one comes from Reddit user Red Leaders. It's been one of the most popular stories posted to the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit, and you're about to see why. It starts with him walking along a trail. He said, "The trail leads up to a set of abandoned train tracks on the other side, which sits about 15 feet above the path and a pond below. I was crossing the train tracks when I decided I wanted some ice cream. The fastest way to get to the ice cream shop was to take the path below the train tracks, but there isn't any easy way to cross the pond without going all the way back around, and being 14 years old, I decided that I could just jump from the tracks onto the path below and keep walking. Looking down from above, it didn't seem to be that far of a jump, so that's what I did. The next thing I remember after that was being half conscious in an ambulance. Everything was extremely blurry and the paramedics sounded slightly panicked. I wasn't able to move either of my legs, so I think they were broken. This scene continued on for a few minutes until we arrived at a hospital and I was wheeled into the emergency room on a stretch chair. I only had a few minutes in the emergency room before I eventually lost all consciousness, and that was the last thing I saw. After I'd been unconscious for what felt like about an hour, I opened my eyes and I was on the ground. I just hit the ground again after jumping, but this time I was fully conscious. I hadn't noticed this before I jumped, but there had been a car parked watching me. I think they thought I was attempting suicide, it probably looked that way, and the people in it had jumped out and called an ambulance for me. The ambulance ride had been the exact same as it was the first time, and I was put into the same emergency room that I had died in before. The only difference between the two events was that I was fully conscious this time, and my injuries were much more minor. I was discharged from the hospital the same night with only stitches on my lip, a slightly fractured jaw, and a mild concussion. For a while after this, I assumed that the first scenario had just been a weirdly coincidental dream that I'd had while I was unconscious, so I didn't consider it anything abnormal. It wasn't until a few weeks later when my mom told me that the people who had helped me said that I had been conscious the entire time, I hadn't been knocked out after hitting the ground or anything. Next up at number 5 now, we have the Philadelphia experiment. According to rumors, in 1943 the US Navy made a ship phase out of existence and reappear somewhere else entirely. They were experimenting with the use of large electrical generators to bend light around objects so that they would become completely invisible. Clearly a huge advantage in any military situation. They tested it on the USS Eldridge and reportedly made the ship disappear in front of dozens of witnesses, but it wasn't just a trick of the light. The story goes that they not only made it disappear, they also teleported it. The ship vanished in a flash of blue light and then reappeared over 200 miles away in Norfolk, Virginia, before then returning to Philadelphia soon after. The crew were said to have suffered horrific side effects though. There were reports of sailors who had become fused into the metal on the ship. Some of them just disappeared forever and others went clinically insane. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the SCOLDING. This is one I found on Reddit from Cassie Cuppy Cake. This is a short one, but it caught my eye and I want to hear your thoughts on it. She said, "My husband works third shift, graveyard if you will. We have 2 girls, 7 and 3. They usually wake up to say goodnight to dad before he heads to work. My husband had just left for work and I was in the kitchen, cleaning up before bed as it was around 10:45 PM. I hear the girls arguing and messing around around, the little one cries, and I'm thinking I want to finish the dishes before I break this up. I hear "Stop it now" in my husband's distinct tone, and the girls stop right away. I think that's really weird. Maybe he forgot something and slipped in and I didn't hear because the water was running. So as I turn the corner to check and see what he's doing home, I'm met by two girls that are both expecting to see their dad around the corner. Where's daddy? I don't know what to say. I freeze. I say, well, let's get to bed and stop fighting like dad said. So I tuck them in and then I look outside. The car isn't in the driveway. He's not home. I text him and he was at work the whole time. Does anyone have any theories on that? Please. Please. Moving on to number 3 now, we have GADIANTON Canyon. We're going back to May 1972 for this one, where 4 girls were driving across the desert border from Utah to Nevada one night. A fork in the road appeared. They went left and went through GADIANTON Canyon. After a while, the road changed to white cement. Now they thought they had gone the wrong way, and so they turned around. As soon as they turned around though, on their way back to the fork, the scenery was totally different now. The desert was gone, and in its place were lush trees and fields all around them. Suddenly, one of the girls screamed. A group of egg-shaped vehicles with 3 wheels and blaring lights started chasing after them. They managed to escape and get back to the familiar desert, but had to stop when they ended up with 3 flat tires. They were picked up by a state trooper the next day who was skeptical about their story until he found that the girls' tire tracks had just stopped at one point and he couldn't see them go any further. Had they slipped into another world? Next up at number 2 now, we have the 3rd floor. This one comes from Reddit user Zashiba, who shared their story on a thread discussing the existence of parallel universes. They said, I once went to a conference held at Portland State University. There were a few floors to the building we were in. My teacher had assigned us buddies we were to stick with. I was paired with a guy named Jacob. It's important to note that at the time of the conference, PSU was undergoing a modernization of the building. So, new paint, new rugs, new doors, remodeling of various rooms. Jacob and I were on the 2nd floor and our next meeting was on floor 3. So, instead of taking the stairs, we took the elevator. We were the only 2 on the elevator. When we arrived on floor 3, the doors opened on a dark floor. No lights were on. The hordes of people gone. It was silent. Jacob and I stepped off the elevator onto the floor and looked for our room. We found it, but it was closed, locked, and dark. All the doors that left that wing were locked and it was dark beyond them. Looking out of the windows, there were no cars out on the street, no one playing hacky sack on the grass. The whole world outside was just still. The doors to the stairs were closed and the floor hadn't been renovated yet. Old carpet, old wallpaper from the 70s or some forgotten era. The elevator doors stayed open the entire time Jacob and I explored the floor. We decided we must be in the wrong area, so we hopped back into the elevator and went back to floor 2. Upon arriving, we found ourselves back in the thick of things. People everywhere, doors open, lights on, renovation going on. We found our teacher and told her that we tried to find the room, but floor 3 was dark. She said she was just on floor 3 and it was fully engulfed in activities. Jacob and I looked towards the stairs and saw people going up and coming down as if nothing was wrong. So we took the stairs to floor 3. What we found fully confused the hell out of us. It was exactly the floor we were just on, but it was fully renovated. New carpet, new paint. The whole floor was lit up and abuzz with activity. Rooms were open, people milling about. Doors to other wings opened with people passing in and out. Outside cars were zooming by. People were reading on the grass, playing frisbee, kicking around hacky sacks. We found our room, the very same room that moments ago was closed, locked and dark. Now it was open, lit and had people chatting at tables. To this day, I'm not sure what I experienced. Perhaps they were renaming the floors European style and hadn't updated the elevator yet. I'm not sure at all. And finally at number 1 now, we have Pedro Ramirez. That's the name of this Spanish man who was driving from Seville to Alcalá. It was late at night on November 9th, 1986. Pedro had done this drive many times before and was familiar with the scenery along the way. That's why he bolted upright in his chair when everything around him changed. He found himself on a 6-lane highway. That wasn't normal. On his left was a huge industrial complex that he'd never seen before. On his right he saw new houses. There was dense grass on either side. A feeling of heat came over him and he heard a choir of distant voices. One of these ethereal voices specifically told him that he was now in another dimension. He continued his drive until he found a sign, and before he knew it, he was at his home in Alcalá. Well, that's a mystery to me, just like all the rest of them. There is a parallel universe out there, guys, where you are presenting this video and I'm watching it. How mad is that? In that universe, you're telling me right now to give this video a like. like if I enjoyed it and let you know which story was my favourite. I would definitely do that if you were hosting this video, so you should do that right now for me. It's only fair. Thanks for watching. As always guys, my name is Danny Burke and I will see you all in the next one.